Hi everybody and welcome to my wormery. Food. Lots of food for the worms. Banana peel, cucumbers, a whole bunch of mushroom in here, piece of cantaloupe rind, and you name it. Broccoli chunks, everything under the sun, all kinds of goodies. I just need somewhere to put it, and it's going into my worm bins. My game plan for today is going to be to supplement the bait boxes that I've gotten these that are trying to lure the straggler worms and any sort of newly hatched worms out of the material. Those two bins over there are pretty far along, and at this point I'm going to be setting up barriers like you've seen me do before, perforated barriers, so I can really distinguish between the done castings and the newly established feeding zones. I'm going to be neglecting the little green one on the end. That one's going to just be left to go on its own for a while. A couple days ago off camera I just removed all the chunks of food that were in that and moved it into one of my newer bins. As for these last two, the newer bins that I've got, they're just going to get good, hearty, heavy-duty feedings. So, kind of working them in pairs, doing them two at a time, taking similar approaches to these two, that two, and these two as well. So, should go pretty quick, hopefully. Let's see how it goes. I'm going to get a glove on and we'll get started right away. Okay, so why don't we reposition the camera? Should be good to go. Okay, so the oldest of the boxes are these ones with bait boxes, and then these bait boxes are trying to lure the worms out. See, there's a whole bunch of little tiny worms in there. Little babies, for that matter. And that's exactly what I was after. I was hoping to get the little babies out of the material and into these boxes so I can cleanly evacuate them. You might remember one of these bins was set up in such a way that I really made a direct effort to try to get the worms out of the material. And on another of the boxes, I did not take hardly any effort to, stinky, to keep the worms out. So here, since there are worms, I'm not sure which bin this is. I'm wondering if this is the bin that had the plethora of worms in the material, or if it's the other one. I can't remember now. I don't have a lot of room, so I'm just going to go with something that's got a good likelihood of achieving its goal, which is to lure worms into here. That's a banana peel. And I guess since we're also talking about, baby worms, I'm going to go ahead and throw a little bit of eggshell in there for grit. And we'll cap it back off with the leaf cover. I gotta say that the smell coming out of that box is pretty gross. I think cabbage or some sort of stinky material was put in there. Alright, we'll get the next one out here. Alright, so now on this one, let's put the paper back over here. On this one, let's see underneath. See here, we see a few worms. Some of them are real tiny worms, but it's still rather difficult to distinguish which of these bins was the one that was sifted and which one wasn't. Maybe we'll be able to better tell once we peek inside. See lots and lots of tiny worms. So that was one of the main objectives here, was to allow the material some time so that any sort of unhatched worm eggs have a chance to hatch and let the worms make their way to where the food source is. So let's just get the banana peel in here and a little bit of grit, and we'll let things get back to work. A generous portion. I just prepared a bunch of fresh grit today. Cracked up a few eggshells, ground them down, ran them through a sifter to make sure they're all fine enough to fit into their bellies, to their gizzards. And I'm not being skimpy with it. Especially if we got baby worms moving in and they need it, so it's all for the greater good. Okay, it's pretty cool. This one stinks too. I think we put cabbage in these, so there again, the idea was to put the calling card out and lure the worms in, so stinkier the better. Alright, wow. This is what was referred to as the pumpkin bin. Just gonna put this paper back down here. And This is always our telltale that this was the pumpkin bin. This is the stem of the pumpkin. And you can kind of see here this little drop off. This is where the last feeding occurred. And within, I think it's been 6 days since the last feeding, this level just drops significantly every time they just rip into the food. So now this is one of the boxes that I wanted to do the barrier setup in, because the horizontal migrations are going good as far as I can tell. But when I start getting near the end, I like to sort of create a good clear line to show me where the cutoff point is. And I'm gonna create a dedicated feeding zone here with this cardboard barrier in place. Perforated cardboard barrier. It'll be able to allow the worms to get through with all the holes, and it'll allow me to more clearly distinguish between what's finished castings and what's the new feeding zone at this point. Something else I'd like to do in the process is to take a lot of this uncomposted material that's on the top surface, lots of pumpkin seeds and other chunks of material that's not been broken down yet. Kind of get it into a pile together here and add that to the newly established feeding zone. I'm going to start moving things over to the side in this direction. I'm going to maintain this edge as the feeding zone. And the only difference here is that there's going to be a chunk of cardboard now sort of separating the finished castings from the feeding zone. This is going to be really heavily populated with worms because this is where the food's been for a while now. So as we start to move some of the castings aside, we're going to see all the worms hanging out here. There's also some leftover food chunks over here, so I'm going to put those over in with the uncomposted stuff on the edge that we're going to pile into the feeding zone. If I can grab any larger chunks that are still one piece. Banana peels seem to be sticking together pretty good. Most everything else is fragmented to the point where it's barely distinguishable from the rest of the compost. Okay, so you can see here's a nice worm population in this bin. And the material over here on the side is pretty damp, which is normal as well. Kind of damp castings where the worms are hanging out doing their thing. Let's start positioning this piece of cardboard into place just to see how it's going to fit. Something like this is what I had in mind, which is pretty good. Start off with some leaves on the bottom. It's going to get moist just from the food and the worms doing their thing and stuff, so, and just from the bin being covered up and all the moisture being trapped inside. Just going to take whatever's on the top here. We can see some lettuce, a banana peel, a couple more hunks of lettuce, okay, another banana peel, some more lettuce. That's pretty good, I think. On top of that, we're going to take some of this partially eaten food, those couple of banana peels that were already being worked. I guess we'll just start backfilling the cardboard from the other side to let it stand up straight. And start bringing some of this finished compost back over. I guess anything else I could see, it obviously belongs in there. Drop it in. And once again, I'm going to put in some grit and my old standard feeding material, spent coffee grinds. Okay. Now, if that's not a worm paradise, I don't know what is. You can still see there's chunks of food here and there throughout. See if I can just pick any of those larger pieces out and move them over. Now, just keeping with tradition, I think I'm just going to keep with putting the I'm just going to keep with putting the old pumpkin stem where the food is, and then I'll also keep with tradition by putting the coffee filter where the food is. Although at this point it's quite clear where the food is with the cardboard divider in place. And that's what we're after. That's what I'm after on this one at least. So let's do the same with the other the other bin. All right. Now this other bin that was going to get the same treatment is one that I had sort of considered as putting into a neglect mode, to mean that I was just going to not feed it. But it seems to make sense to try to continue feeding and keep the food supply consistent and steady. So I'm going to give this one the same treatment as the pumpkin bin that we just finished doing. I'm not going to deviate too much. I kind of like the idea of having bins that are sort of in sync with each other, because then I can use them as a kind of a point of reference to compare the bins to one another. It also helps me see if there's anything going on with one or the other bin that might not be completely what I want. Right, so here again, we're just going to make space for the new feeding zone. But since we've been feeding over on this edge, we should once again expect to see a huge amount of worms hanging out over here. But I'm going to do the same again, is pull out some of these uncomposted food bits so that we can reload them into the new feeding zone afterwards. Anything that is still uncomposted food is going to end up in the feeding zone, and everything else should be assumed to be finished castings from that point forward. So scooping out everything that's still in progress is going to be key here, since there's a fair amount of it. You can feel it in different places and different sizes. More little chunks. What's this? Another half of a mango seed. Okay, I think we're getting there. I really wanted to get this bin into its final sort of home stretch mode, because it's obviously overfilled here. It's already kind of at its capacity limit. Alrighty, here we go. Good. Alrighty, so now same story as before. We're going to lay in a nice couple handfuls of bedding at the bottom, leaves, followed by some of this uncomposted food material from the previous feeding zone. Try to grab some of this uncomposted stuff that we shoveled together in the beginning. Put in a little bit of grit, since we're hoping to have a bunch of nice young worms moving in soon. Here's a bunch of cucumber peelings and banana peels. There's a little bit of lettuce, some hunks of strawberry. Let's begin backfilling this wall here. Yeah, it's kind of hard. It's hard to not overflow here. Let's see how we can get things to level off here nicely. And some coffee grinds. Looks like there's a little bit more space, so why don't I just throw in a little bit of leaf cover here. Deviating a little bit from what we did in the other one, not a big deal. It's all worm food as far as I'm concerned. And we'll mark the feeding zone in the traditional fashion. A very full bin. Alright, so now second oldest bin here is been going for about a month and a half now, and we've not yet gotten to the point where we're feeding on any one or the other side. We're still feeding down the middle, just kind of my normal mode of doing this. different types of stuff in here. Trying to see what I can recognize. This was this weird something. I don't know what it is. Look at the weird liquid, oh, just liquid juicing out of it. Some sort of vegetable that was starting to go bad. Here's some rice. You know, they'll continue eating all the stuff that's already broken down nicely that they can rip into. And then what I'm adding now will eventually become accessible to them. And it does take time. It takes time for their food to kind of get to that broken down state where they can get at it. Little microscopic stuff, get a foothold on the food first before the worms can get at it. And that takes time. Alright, so like we see in all the feeding zones, it's pretty moist down through the center here. I can feel warmth too as I put my fingers through there, so they're really working this material, and in the spots where they're huddled together, you can really feel some warmth. It's pretty interesting. But instead of adding bedding from the outside, my thought on this one was to try to use some of the existing dry stuff that's in the bin already, that's been in here for some time now, and just take it off the edge here and drop it down into the feeding zone. Get everything a fair crack at getting worked. And at this point, you know, you might have noticed me moving some of the food articles off to the edge as well. I'm not going to worry so much about bringing all of it back to the middle. I mean, some of this stuff on the very top, I'll drop it back in. But if some of it got pushed out to the edge, you know, so be it. That's fine. Nothing says that the food has to be in any particular spot, especially not at this early stage of the game. And why don't we drop in some fresh food here. I'll use this other bag as well. Alright, all kinds of goodies for them. I'll give them some more of this and that. Looking good. Now I guess I'll see if I can scoop some more of this dry stuff from the edge over to the center again. And start giving everything a chance to moisten up. Alright, we've got one last bin to do. Let's get that one out here and give it a good hearty feeding, and we'll be finished for the day. This has been my sort of catch-all bin lately. I've been, when I took my time lapse and I dismantled it, I threw all the material in here from that bin. I took out all the big chunks of food from the little green bin that's going into neglect mode now. I put all those chunks of food in here as well. I've been using the middle as the feeding area as well on this one too, which makes sense since it is my newest bin. Here it doesn't seem like the edges are that dry. Here's another one of these large chunks of whatever that was. Let's see what we can find in here. The worms are just having a field day in here, aren't they? Looks like a party. Banana peels, all kinds of stuff. Chunks of cardboard. Cardboard we decided didn't need to be laying out on the top surface anymore, so it went in as bedding. Oh, interesting. Another thing that makes this bin a little bit different is what we placed in it as food in the very beginning, which was a lot of the uncomposted stuff that got sifted out when I harvested a couple of bins recently. And that was stuff like the shells of pistachios and the shells of chestnuts, all kinds of seeds from watermelon, or pumpkin rather. And as I run my fingers through here, I can feel that that's what this stuff is made up of. Here's a pistachio shell. So it's good that that sort of stuff is right down the middle here. It's where all the action is, and it's exposing it all to moisture to help it soften up and hopefully in time get gobbled up. All right, that's pretty good. So we'll just take some of these pieces of cardboard, drop them back down here, some of these uncomposted chunks of food we pulled out. Before we plop in some fresh food, we'll give them a little bit of the grit that they love so much. What have we here? Banana peel, a bunch of mushrooms. Like I said earlier, this bin's been getting foods from various other places lately, so we might not have to put quite as much food in here. So why don't we give them that last bonus item. I'm going to knock off whatever's left of the coffee grinds. Chunks of cardboard with some rice on it. Another piece of cardboard, a chestnut shell. And now we'll just sort of cover up. It's always fun feeding the worms, and that's why I like to roll the camera while I do it. But that concludes the last of the bins that needed feeding today, so I'll just wrap up by putting these chunks of cardboard back over the upper surface of this bin, and I'm cleaning up a little bit around here, but you don't need to stick around for all that. The exciting part is all over now. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your time and your company. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure you give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. And consider signing up to be a subscriber to my channel as well. This way, if I publish any new content, you might get a notification from YouTube letting you know that there's some new stuff out there to watch if you're interested. All right, everyone. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye. Have a great day.